Alright, so I'll get this out of the way quickly. Warner Bros. Is copyright claiming most of these Teen Titans videos and trying to take the revenue from them. Because of that, I'm doubtful I'm going to be able to make any more money from these. Unfortunately, I need money, so that's a big factor in determining how often I can get these done. So if you want to see more long-running review type deals like this, please consider supporting my work on Patreon. Anyway, I'll go more in depth about that at the end of the video, but I hope you enjoy my review of Season 4. Thanks for watching. I really enjoy the first episode of Season 4 of Teen Titans. My boy Control Freak is finally back in all his fabulous glory, and he's ready to bring the fourth wall breaking mayhem. Now, despite how much I enjoy this one, it's hard to say all that much about it, as I usually focus on either character or thematic development, or, for most episodes, both. Yet, at the end of this one, the characters let me off the hook as they say that there's no meaning to the whole episode, which is the perfect punchline to this episode, I think. And most of what I could say about this is self-evident in the episode itself. Like how it starts with Control Freak speaking into the TV in a way that begins as looking like he's also speaking to the audience through their TVs. Or how the aspect ratio changes in some sections to look more cinematic, or how the characters speak in rhyming patterns, or how funny I find this Azarath Metreon Zinthos infomercial. The way it constantly switches things up stops the episode from getting stale, and this stands out as one of my favorite comedic episodes in the series. Though it's by no means a good indication of where this season of Teen Titans is heading, it doesn't need to be. I think it's actually good to put an episode like this at the front of the season, as it could be a strange change of pace if it was placed in the middle of the season, especially with how serious some of these upcoming episodes are going to get. Episode 2 is a lot less strange and tells a pretty typical story, though it does so in a satisfying and enjoyable manner. After all, I'm sure most of us have seen stories that follow a pattern very similar to what this episode does. Of the hero trying to find an individual who can teach them new things, only to encounter roadblocks along the way that they need to overcome, and then to realize that the teacher isn't quite what they expected. Nothing wrong with that though. Most stories are just variations of other stories after all. I mean, I found it incredibly obvious that this old lady was going to be the true master, but that might not have been the case if I had watched this when I was younger, and that didn't really take away from my enjoyment of the episode. It's nice to see Robin get stripped of his usual gadgets, left to learn more about the basics of fighting hand to hand. Each of his fights with these Guardians are different enough that they are consistently entertaining, and none of them run too long. It's great how each of these encounters adds a new move or way of fighting to his routine, and having him fight this villain twice, once at the beginning and once at the end of the episode, lends it a competent and effective structure. We see Robin fail, then some of his training, and then we see him best the same foe he lost to earlier, and thus, we see the positive benefits of that training. From the snake, he learns to fight without his sense of sight. From the monkey, he learns about better balance and agility. And from the bear, he learns how to fight with his hands better, I guess? Yeah, I'm not as sure what he learned from the bear, but you know, the overall message here is pretty clear. I mean, the true master even says this to him around 19 minutes into the episode. Though some people try to take the easy path in life, it's worthwhile to take the right path in life. Eventually, skipping steps is likely to come back and bite you, and you need to be properly prepared to overcome obstacles later by learning along the way. It's a good lesson for anyone to learn. After all, how many people still plagiarize in university even when they know that the ramifications can only get worse as they get older? We've seen people lose their jobs over this stuff. I don't think there's an age limit for someone needing to learn this lesson. Another part of this is that Robin needs to learn to take himself less seriously here. He needs to humble himself. That part of the lesson he learns from the true master as he goes up the mountain, as he carries her things for her and talks with her, despite how much of a rush he's in. It's also through this that the comedic subplot of this episode manages to tie into the main plot at the end. Throughout the whole episode, the other Titans are dressing up as Robin when he's gone, something that we may expect to upset him, since these are all his clothes and gadgets and such. Yet when he returns to the team, he makes a joke about them all wearing his stuff and just chills out. I like that lesson too. Hard work is important, but it's also important to never let your ego get in the way, even when that hard work pays off. Then there's also the fact that this subplot helps to break up the action of the main plot when it may have gone stale without anything else going on around it. Overall, this is a really good episode and very well constructed. This time I'm going to be going about this the same way I did with Season 3, so I'm skipping Episode 3 for now, since that's part of the main plot. In general, people seem to prefer that method. I will, however, still talk about how this season's construction affected my enjoyment of Raven's plot, though it honestly had no major effect on it. So, Episode 4. In this one, Cyborg gets sent off to the past, to 3000 BC specifically, and saves these people from evil creatures and an evil dude. I like this episode quite a lot. First of all, it's a smart move to put Cyborg in a position where his technology has such extreme advantages, but also where he can't stay because of the lack of electricity. It's an interesting way to put both positive and negative focus on Cyborg's robotic parts at the same time. However, that's by no means the only focus of this episode. In the last season, we saw how much Cyborg wants to be a leader, how he wants to be the best he can be, the most useful he can be. And now here he is, in the perfect place to do that, to show his abilities to the fullest. And he's fighting against a villain that wants the same thing he wants, but just goes about it the wrong way. Unlike in the last season, Cyborg doesn't win this battle due to luck or the power of will. Instead, he comes up with a strategy that ends up helping these people succeed. So basically, this is a shorter version of the same arc we were shown in Season 3, but it's more effective in one episode than that one was in 4. This episode also makes it clear how far Cyborg will go for those he feels he can protect. After all, he chooses to stay in this world when given his opportunity to leave, and for all he knows, this could be his only opportunity. But he can't leave because he knows that Krall has been getting this witch to summon all these evil creatures, and he has to stop them now. This is essentially Cyborg accepting that in the long run, he could basically die for these people. I mean, if his battery runs out and there's no electricity, what happens next? Cyborg's interaction with Raven here is really good too, with how Raven shows him that Sarah Sim and her group were still victorious, even without him there. She doesn't say much, but her care for him is obvious in this action. One complaint I have with this episode is that I felt that Cyborg and Sarah Sim's romantic relationship was a bit forced, and I don't think it was necessary to give it that spin. Even if this episode focused exclusively on romance, it would be hard to get us to care about a relationship in one episode. Never mind with all this other stuff going on. There's no reason that Cyborg and Sarah Sim couldn't just be good friends. Still though, that's not a big complaint, as it's not even really related to the central themes of this episode. Another issue I have is, well, how did the Titans get Cyborg back from 5,000 years in the past? Can Raven time travel? My guess is that the writers had a longer script and had to cut down for time, and they had to put in something unexplained like this. But it's still a good episode, and one that I thoroughly enjoyed. Then there's Season 4, Episode 5, which, yeah, I don't really know what to say about this one. It's an episode of TV, alright. I guess I have at least one thing to say though. The animation in this is insanely good at some points. Probably the best action sequence in the whole series so far is here. It elevates the whole episode for me, and how well made it was had me not thinking too much about what this episode is actually about. And that's good, because this one's weird, really weird. I've been trying to see if I can pull any sort of message or central theme from this, but I think that, above all else, it's just what it seems to be on the surface. Rewatching it hasn't revealed any particular errors with it, but it also hasn't revealed anything to analyze. It's a zany, comedic time where the characters remain as they always have been and don't change in any significant ways. Still, it's insanely fun. But I do have quite a bit to say about the next one. Troc. I love this episode. In this episode, the team meets Valyor, whose charisma and general kindness leads the team to trust him quickly and help him out on his mission. However, this all changes when it's revealed that he hates Tamaranians. He begins calling Starfire Troc, which is basically a racial slur directed at Starfire's people. I love how this episode doesn't make Valyor into a caricature. One thing that's easy to do as a writer is to oversimplify how an individual with a terrible trait may act. With racism, this is definitely pertinent. The racist individual can begin and end with just being an arse. There's nothing more to them. That way, it's simpler. The world remains black and white. But the thing is, Valyor isn't just a racist. When the person isn't Tamaranian, he's kind, supportive, helpful, and heroic. He has a ton of good traits. This works to show that people aren't always as they first appear. Someone can seem nice at first, but later you may realize that some things about them are terrible. Basically, I think it's always good to remember that, with anyone who's racist, racism isn't their only trait. For a kid who may encounter that stuff, this is an invaluable lesson to learn, I think. And the show's take on this manages to be realistic without resorting to total cynicism. You know the craziest part of all this? Valyor ends off the episode worse than he is at the start. After he attempts to apologize to Starfire, and I'm putting apologize in huge air quotes that you can't see, the other Titans basically tell him off for still insulting her. I mean, the best he can do is, I guess you're one of the good ones. Great. And after the Titans tell him how stupid this is, he leaves, now with the belief that Earthlings are bad too. What? I was honestly shocked by how nuanced and great this is. Sometimes people's minds won't be changed no matter what you do. It's a hard thing to accept, but here Teen Titans is, trying to teach that to youngins. But it's also showing that you can talk to people if someone treats you this way, that you can find friends who will stick by your side, and that you shouldn't hold it all in if someone says these sorts of terrible things to you. Then there's this exchange between Cyborg and Starfire, which I'd play in full, but copyright would come to find me if I tried that. Plus, you've already seen it. Basically, Cyborg talks about how difficult it can be to deal with racism, to fight against it. That part is genuinely moving. There's also this, though, where Starfire asks Cyborg if he knows how it feels to be judged this way, and he says,
Of course I do. I'm part robot.
I think that speaks for itself. It's so stupid. Oh, man. And I haven't even gotten to Starfire's part of all this. She doesn't let value or speech change who she is or how she acts. She still prioritizes doing good over anything else. I'd dive into this more, but I plan to run through a lot of stuff about her character later in the series. So if you've been wondering why I've skimmed over a lot of stuff about her until now, therein lies the reason. But I do want to make it clear how much I love how she acts here. Next up is Stranded, which is the 8th episode of this season. Now is probably a good time to talk about Robin and Starfire's relationship, which is at the center of this episode. I know some people have expressed some frustration at the fact that I haven't talked about this more, especially with Betrothed, so let's rectify that here, shall we? Part of why I haven't talked about this as much is because I don't have all that much to say. I like their relationship, but everything I could say about it feels self-evident from the show itself. With Betrothed, for example, they make it very clear that Robin is upset about the fact that Starfire might get married. I will say, though, that the fact that I like their dynamic did add tension to that episode. But this episode focuses much more on that relationship and on the tension that is found in the relationship itself. Here, we see a lot of stereotypical female-male relationship dynamic stuff, like how Robin has trouble expressing his feelings and Starfire is upset with the lack of proper communication. While stereotype does come with negative connotations, I don't mind this, as it feels perfectly in line with their characters. Robin isn't the sort of guy to talk about his feelings all that much. We've seen that. He keeps to himself a lot of the time, at least when he's very serious about something. Starfire, meanwhile, puts being close with her friends above almost anything else. She wants them to get along and understand each other as much as possible. So of course that would cause some conflict, and it's good to see it get somewhat worked out in this episode. I particularly enjoy how natural raising the stakes is in this situation. After all, we've known for a long time now that Starfire's powers are tied to her emotions. But this is the first time we've seen it become a problem for her. I honestly hadn't considered that these might turn off until it happened, even though I should have, because Starfire is such a consistent character. So this helps us understand just how strongly she feels for Robin and how he affects her in a way that no one else has and nothing else does. Plus, this makes the theme of the episode a bit more complex than it may otherwise be. Robin may need to learn to put his feelings into words, but this is also on Starfire for giving up on communication entirely. They're both at fault here, and that puts them both in danger. And what exactly do I think the theme here is? Well, I think it serves as a reminder that all relationships involve little spats like this. That's normal, and those are something to be worked through. Sometimes stuff like this can bother me, as often characters who are being romantically paired in a story will seem to constantly hate each other, or to rarely, if ever, get along. But this is different. Starfire and Robin almost always get along. This is still a healthy relationship and friendship through and through. That's what made this connect with me and what makes their relationship better than many similar so hinted at it hurts romances in television. Also, they're just really dorky together when they're happy. I like it. Just two little derps in a derpy world. As for the other aspects of this episode, well, the fights with the alien are fun, the other characters' little journeys serve as a good way to break up Robin and Starfire stuff, and Robin's development here works really well in the context of the whole plot of this season. I mean, in the end, he's going to need to help Raven by communicating his feelings to her, which is, of course, different from communicating something romantic, but still, it helps build towards that. Next up is another Cyborg-centric episode, Overdrive. I like this one quite a lot. Here, Cyborg feels that he doesn't have enough time in the day to do everything he wants to do, so he purchases a computer chip that will help him do more in the day than he's normally able to do. Of course, the central problem Cyborg has here is that life is too short and that time goes by too quickly. It's a problem that a lot of us can relate to. I know I certainly can. The amount of times I've fallen asleep at 4 a.m. because I want to keep working on these videos is unfortunate. I should probably stop doing that, I guess. Anyway, this episode's exploration of its central idea is pretty simple but very effective. At first, this chip does wonders for Cyborg. However, he becomes obsessed with maximizing his efficiency and wasting no time, to the point where he starts taking shortcuts that negatively impact him in serious ways. This can be read as someone taking drugs like Ritalin or Adderall to help them focus on their schoolwork, or as someone sleeping less but using coffee to get an extra kick in the morning. In other words, despite the fact that the basis of Cyborg's change is something we can't relate to, since he's, part robot, it's easily comparable to many different situations that we may encounter. Obviously, the show is telling us not to do this to ourselves. In addition, it's also dishing out the lesson that it's good to sometimes take a step back and slow down. That can be healthy, both for our bodies and our minds. The ultimate way the episode shows this is through how the Titans defeat this episode's villain. Cyborg tricks him. So he does something that he can only do by slowing down. He creates a plan and acts on that plan. It's not necessarily about working all the time as hard as you can. It's about working in a smart manner too. Overall, this is just a very thematically focused episode, and yet another strong one that Season 4 has to offer. Next up is Mother Mae-eye. In this one, the Titans are mind-controlled by an evil witch named Mother Mae-eye, who convinces them that they are her children and tries to make them into a pie. Yeah, it's weird. Of course, it's clearly taking heavy inspiration from Hansel and Gretel in order to create the villain and later setting of this episode. Starfire is the one who sees the truth of the situation and manages to save the team. It seems to me that this is another way that the show puts emphasis on Starfire's emotional maturity, though the reason given by the show is that she got bumped on the head and that's why she manages to break free from Mother Mae-eye's spell. Other than that though, this episode is far more concerned with creating a unique plot than it is with having a thematic core. And that's not by any means an inherently bad thing, though it did cause me personally to find this episode a bit more dull than many of the other ones in this season. Still, it's not bad. It's just not all that good either. My main problem with it comes with the end of the episode. Though I know that this moment when they give the pie over to the Hive 5 is meant to be comedic, it's pretty horrifying. Unless the Titans intervene later, they basically condemned all these people to get cooked into a pie and murdered. It just doesn't seem like something the Titans would do. This is one of those situations where if you think for a second about what the creators are trying to do, it's obvious that they didn't want to give the impression that the Titans would try to get these other 5 people murdered. But if you just view the show itself, that's all there is to it. But with that out of the way, it's time to move on to the main arc of the season. An arc that, based on the comments on my videos thus far, seems to be a fan favorite. Before getting into the details of the arc itself though, I want to take a moment to talk about how the overall construction of this season works. Personally, I feel that this season does a solid job of integrating its main arc and its episodic plots together, and that this is all Raven's life has ever been. What I mean is that Raven has always been about, in some part, ignoring the inevitable end and trying to become good enough that she can make up for it or somehow avert it. So the fact that these episodic pieces of the story show her acting as she always does works well. Sure, the main arc isn't mentioned, but why would it be? Raven never mentioned it before, and it was there in the background then, too. She doesn't want people to worry about it. She doesn't want to make her friends' lives worse. And similarly, they know that she doesn't want them getting too involved, so they make their protective chamber for her without telling her what they're doing. So it makes sense on that level that we don't see it get made either. Now we can talk about Raven's arc, which is certainly interesting. There's a lot to unpack here, but let's start with episode 3, Birthmark. Right off the bat, we're getting to see just how afraid of the end of the world Raven is, with how she sits in her room and in particular with how she screams when her friends surprise her for her birthday. As far as I can recall, we've never seen her scream like this before, never seen her show quite this much fear. So about 4 minutes into this arc, we know just how serious these stakes must be, and just how scary this conflict is for her. We also see a lot about how Raven's self-loathing and anxiety affects her. First off, having the end of the world tied to her birthday obviously adds to this. What other event do we all have that is so much about us as individuals, about the fact that we exist? It's by no means unique to have a birthday tied to some big cataclysmic event in fiction, but it's certainly an effective method of conveying something about Raven's character concisely. Second, she rejects help from her friends, as she's done previously, and isolates herself. But these episodes give us a new context for that action. She doesn't want anyone else to get involved in what is her problem. After all, if she weren't alive, then the end of the world wouldn't come about. She's inherently a bad thing to have alive in the world, at least in her mind. Having friends at all causes a cognitive dissonance between the side of her that doesn't want to exist, and the side that wants to live a good and fulfilling life. Of course she isolates herself. However, having Robin try to connect with her this early in the season is a good decision. Their relationship is absolutely integral to this arc. With how events play out, Raven can't win without Robin. Really, this arc is in large part about Raven learning to connect with others and learning to trust that they can help her. By extension, she's also learning that she doesn't need to punish herself because of what her father has told her, that she doesn't need to isolate herself and be afraid all the time. While this is explored through all her relationships, the main focus is on Robin. Then there's the reintroduction of Slade, who comes back more powerful than ever, with newfound superpowers. It's nice to see a version of Slade with a clear motivation that's easy to understand. Though it isn't spelled out to us quite yet, as soon as I saw him again, shooting fire out of his hands like this, I was pretty certain that he had borrowed powers from some sort of underworld force and was doing this in order to regain his life. And the show does hint at that this soon. After all, he comes back by digging his way out of the ground with mysterious lights around him. This is a pretty good way to telegraph to the audience that he didn't survive. He did die. It's just that something strange happened in the afterlife. On top of this, there's the fact that he's branded, which made me think that his powers were lent to him. Plus, after Brother Blood, I'm just happy to have Slade back. This focus on death and the end of the world obviously makes this arc a lot darker than any of the arcs preceding it. Some of the imagery is pretty spooky too, like these statues of Robin, Starfire, Cyborg, and Beast Boy with ghouls coming up and grabbing them, the blood-red sky, the sunken buildings, and the magma. This arc is quite hellish. Now, while normally I would continue on by going through each of these episodes in this arc one by one, with this arc I feel it's most useful to break this down based on the elements that these episodes share, now that our discussion of episode 3 has established some of the basics of what these episodes are focusing on. First, let's talk about the presentation of this arc. In short, it's fantastic. The animation, shot composition, direction, all of it is a big improvement over the other major arcs in the other seasons. Basically, this is the most well-presented arc in Teen Titans so far. Regardless of the plot, it's a joy to watch for that reason alone. Tied into this is how great the fight scenes are. Now, while the animation is certainly a major part of what makes it work, another part is how these fight scenes are emotionally constructed to reflect Raven's struggle. First of all, we don't see Raven fighting nearly as much as the other characters in this arc. In fact, rather than fighting, she's generally either not present or running away. So while her friends fight for her, while they try to keep hope for her, she abandons them continually. Second, there's the way that this fight scene, where Beast Boy, Cyborg, and Starfire need to fight these sorts of shadow selves, reflects Raven's struggle in this arc. She can't fight Trigon on her own. She can't break free of her inner shackles that stop her from fighting him. And these characters can't defeat the worst sides of themselves alone either. Instead, they need to turn to their friends, and their friends help them. So these fight scenes continually accentuate and emphasize the emotional thrust of Raven's journey as a character, while also looking nice on top of that. It's fabulous. Now that we've gone through that a little bit, let's talk about the main part of what makes this arc work. Raven. I've had some trouble writing this part of the video, honestly. The main reasons are that I feel that the show so successfully establishes a setting and tone that reflects her inner struggle, that it explores its themes in such a wonderful way, that the show contains depth while also being accessible to its viewer. In other words, I think that the show does such a good job here that it's hard to add much or critique much. But that's not going to stop me from trying, even if I am going to skim over many great moments. Like how Raven tries to make her friend's last day alive a good one, or how she cries when she realizes the end is here. Because it would essentially just become me going, yep, this is great, about pretty much every aspect of the arc if I did it that way. The main thematic core of this arc involves the concept of fate and what that means. While Robin states time and time again that he refuses to accept fate and that he believes people make their own fate, Raven's relationship with this concept is far more complex, as she's been told since she was young that her destiny was to bring about the end of the world by acting as a portal for Trigon. However, the point of this arc is that there is no fate. Instead, Trigon convinced Raven that she was powerless against him, that this was her destiny, and in doing so created the events that would allow him to kill all mortals. Here, the concept of fate is manufactured to make Raven give up on the very idea that she could ever beat Trigon, though she, of course, can. It's essentially a self-fulfilling prophecy. Raven's complexity of character here is pretty interesting. While her actions often point to her believing in this fate, it's clear that she refuses to buy into this logic when it comes to one thing, or rather, 4 people. She doesn't believe that her becoming the portal will cause her friends' deaths, as then there would be no reason for her to protect them after Trigon comes back. After all, the prophecy states that this is the end of all things mortal. Clearly, this is an inconsistency, but it's not the sort of inconsistency caused by poor writing. We're merely seeing that Raven's mind, even at this point when she willingly becomes the portal, has been somewhat swayed by all the time she's spent with her friends and all the time she's spent as a hero. A part of her knows she can fight back, but she hasn't yet totally accepted that fact. This creates a relationship where Robin is only able to continue being her hope because she carried the hope that he could win, and he's only able to carry on because he has the hope that she can win. They both refuse to give up on each other, though it seems that Raven is hopeless at times. She simply needs someone to believe her even after all seems lost. She needs someone to act as confident in the idea that she can save the world and change fate as Trigon and the others in her life were in telling her about her supposed destiny for so long. We also see what she's done, that all the time she's spent with her friends and all the time she's spent being a hero have created a new pattern of action in her mind. What I mean is that even when she's boiled down to her essence, when she becomes a child again, she still tells her friends to fight, still aids them, and still watches over them. This seems almost instinctual to her now. Just as people with anxiety can attempt to build up new patterns of action through acting in a different manner, so has Raven's time acting this way provided her with new possibilities and new habits that will aid her here. I love what this arc has to say about concepts like fate and destiny. They don't exist. We make our own fate. I really wish I'd seen this as a kid, and I hope someone who needed to receive this message saw it. Because as a kid, I had a strong belief in concepts like fate and destiny that were passed down from a religious upbringing that, unfortunately, didn't end up serving me particularly well. Because of what I believed, I did stupid things and suffered for no reason other than that I believed in some twisted conception of fate that had been jammed into my brain. So this arc is personal for me. Watching Raven was, at times, like watching a younger version of myself try to work through the idea that I had no free will, and realizing that I did. Well, this is getting pretty heavy. But my point is that the strength of this arc comes in its themes and in how powerfully it relays those themes to the audience, and how strong it makes the Titans bond. Robin, Cyborg, Starfire, and Beast Boy go through hell for Raven, and Raven goes through hell for her friends. If you haven't seen this arc in a while, go watch it again. It's great. There's a good reason so many of you wanted to hear my thoughts on it, and there's a good reason so many of you love it. If I were to try and improve it at all, well, there's only really one thing that I can think of that's beyond nitpicking. As I've mentioned, Cyborg's, Beast Boy's, and Starfire's fight with their shadow selves works well here, but I felt that a bit of the time spent on those fights could have been spent better elsewhere. In particular, I would have liked to see a bit of Raven's past. However, the arc does plenty to emphasize this, so it really is a pretty minor complaint, and actually less of a complaint and more of something I personally would have liked to see. But what does that mean in the face of what the rest of this arc means? Not much. Seeing the Titans happy after this, goofing around, supporting each other, just being together, it means something. The relationship means more than it ever has before. So kudos to the writers for making an arc that is both exciting and emotional, and that took this series, in my opinion, to new heights that it had not yet reached. This is definitely my favorite season of Teen Titans so far, and I'm pretty excited to see where Season 5 is going to take me. Now, normally this is the part where I'd say thank you and we'd be done, but unfortunately things are a little bit different this time because, as I said at the very beginning of this video, Warner Bros. Has come for me. Fortunately right now I'm still disputing this with them, but I've dealt with Warner Bros. Twice before and they haven't let my appeal go through either time, so yeah, I'm doubtful that's going to change now. This has made me realize that, although I want to make more long-running series after this one, they do carry some risks as well as benefits. What I mean is that where I could have talked about multiple shows in this time that are owned by multiple companies that might not try to take the money from me, I've instead just talked about this one show. So when they find me, instead of it being that they take revenue from maybe a couple weeks worth of work, they're taking revenue from months worth of work. Another problem is that since these series have so many parts, I can't really dispute this with the company a second time. For those who don't know, the first time I dispute, the company just says, no, we don't agree, we're still taking the money. But if I dispute again, the company has to make the decision of whether or not to let me keep the revenue or to take the video down. If the video gets taken down, that's a strike on my channel. 3 strikes and my channel goes bye-bye. So I basically can't dispute a long-running series like this a second time because, well, it would put my channel at too much of a risk of getting deleted. Now, I want to make more long-running series. I've seen people request Young Justice, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2003, Gravity Falls, Avatar The Last Airbender, and many other shows. Unfortunately though, these series take a ton of time and I've just gone back to university as a full-time student. Of course, if these videos bring in some income, then I can treat this as my part-time job through university and that's awesome. There would be no real slowing down as far as their creation is concerned. But if I can't make money, then I'll have to find another part-time job, which means that long-running series like these become a lot less feasible. I'd still make them, of course, but there's no chance I'd be able to get approximately 1 done per week. Plus, there's the fact that this could only be longer like this because I had the money to pay an editor to do it. Otherwise, the process of writing and editing would make it basically impossible to have a schedule anywhere close to this. So all of this is to say that, if you enjoy my videos and want to see more of them on a consistent basis, please consider supporting my work on Patreon. Now, don't take this as some desperate plea or something like that. I've seen way too many people manipulating their audience with tears and anger to get them to give them money. I never want to do that to you. Only give me money if you feel that the videos are worth that money. Plus, I have some rewards over there, but the main one is going to be that, in about half a week to a week, I'm going to hold a vote among all the patrons on what series I review next. So if you want to have a say in what I cover next, that's a good way to go about it. Also, remember that any little bit counts. If even just 1/25th of my audience gave $1 a month, that would be $1,000 a month, which would definitely be enough. Of course, I don't expect that, but I just want to make the point that everything counts. Anyway, sorry to do this to all of you. I tried to make it less annoying by putting it at the end of the video. I really appreciate you sticking around till now. Thank you so much for watching this though, and as always, thank you to all my patrons. While this whole copyright thing is frustrating, ultimately your viewership on this series has aided this channel in incredible ways. I'm so thankful for that, and I'm just overjoyed. Also, this one wasn't edited by Chris like the last two have been. Instead, my boy Jack Is Boy edited it because Chris was a busy boy. So go show Jack Is Boy some love. A link to his channel is in the description below. You're the best. I love you all, and I look forward to hearing from you in the comments below. Have a good one.